Ok, let's do it. Allora, buonasera a tutti, grazie di essere qui questa sera, nonostante sia il 6 di luglio, mi pare, e che il resto del mondo è in piscina, al mare, in montagna, eccetera. E quindi vorrei ringraziarvi perché essere qui oggi è un segno di dedizione verso la cultura contemporanea. E siamo qui oggi per celebrare l'ingresso di una nuova opera nelle collezioni permanenti del Castello di Rivoli. Si tratta dell'opera di Beeple, Mike Winkelmann, il cui titolo è FTX BOARD MEETING, Day 5676, 11 November 2022. Quindi vedremo cosa è successo 11 November o forse 10 November o forse 9 November 2022 che ha portato a questa creazione di questa immagine. Ma prima devo ringraziare tutti coloro che rendono possibile le nostre attività. Desidero innanzitutto ringraziare la Regione Piemonte, senza la quale naturalmente il Castello di Rivoli non sarebbe mai esistito e che supporta primariamente le nostre attività. La città di Torino, che è anche socio fondatore del nostro museo, e la città di Rivoli, che anche essa socia del museo, e l'edificio, il Castello di Rivoli, è naturalmente della città di Rivoli. Desidero anche ringraziare la Fondazione CRT, che supporta le nostre attività e supporta anche la crescita della nostra collezione permanente. Intesa San Paolo, partner nostro, la Fondazione Compagnia di San Paolo che supporta il nostro CRRI, le nostre attività di upgrade tecnologico, e sicuramente altri enti con i quali collaboriamo spesso e che non menziono qui. Desidero ringraziare tutti gli amici del Castello iscritti al gruppo, e vedo diversi di loro qui e quindi è un piacere avervi con noi, perché un museo è vivo anche grazie alla presenza della comunità dei collezionisti e degli amanti dell'arte che sono loro. E ringrazio anche gli artisti che sono presenti. Ringrazio anche per il Ministero della Cultura il segretario regionale delegato per il Piemonte, la dottoressa Beatrice Maria Bentivoglio Ravasio, che è qui con noi, e il nostro Dipartimento Educazione che organizza, e il nostro Dipartimento Public Programs con Giulia Coletti, che organizzano le nostre attività. Un ringraziamento questa sera in particolare va anche all'amico Emiliano Rossi, che con grande competenza legale per l'expertise in ambito artistico si è avventurato ad aiutarci a far entrare un NFT per la prima volta nella collezione del nostro museo, cosa non semplice. Ci sono altri musei che hanno acquisito per le collezioni NFT, in particolare penso all'ACMA LA e penso anche al Pompidou, che ha appena iniziato questa attività, ma forse siamo all'avanguardia anche rispetto a loro, ho saputo, dal punto di vista del wallet, e ne parleremo dopo. So there's one ringraziamento ancora più importante che devo fare, il principale, ed è all'artista Mike Winkelmann. Everybody clap, clap, clap. Clap, clap, clap. Perché ha accettato l'invito mio del museo a donare un lavoro alla collezione, e quindi vive in un universo di collezionismo diverso, nuovo, innovativo, non molto legato ai musei nel senso tradizionale, quindi il fatto di avventurarsi anche lì in una nuova situazione a sostegno dei musei pubblici, perché noi siamo un museo aperto al pubblico ma anche pubblico, controllato dal pubblico, i soci sono pubblici, è una grande fiducia nel pubblico e quindi sono molto grata a lui per questo. Quindi, at this point, I should translate, but maybe not, maybe just summarize. I basically thanked everybody who's important in this project, and I also would like to add thanks to Marcella Beccaria, our vice director and chief curator, who has been translating. So that's very good. And now I would like to invite Mike and Giulia Coletti, who's our curator of digital contents, to come up and join me in this talk, which I think is streaming on the YouTube channel, right? It's streaming, right?
Yeah.
Did we send the link to Scott?
I guess so.
Did you send it to me?
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to send it to Scott in Charleston, so that you guys can send it out to the world. He asked for the link for the streaming.
Well, he doesn't have very many followers.
Oh.
So I probably need to send that
I
out.
fratelli. Okay, so i brothers. So mandare il link a
Is
Mike,
the link
e
on
invece,
Facebook? What's it on?
Well, it's on our YouTube channel. Julia
gonna send it to you,
is
Mike.
gonna WhatsApp
Now.
it to you, and that way you can turn everybody's computers on around the world.
Done.
Okay.
Because we live in this strange moment where the public programs are both embodied, but they're also disembodied. So, and more people are disembodied now than embodied, which is a strange and interesting condition that I hope we will discuss together. So, Mike, do you want to be there where you are? I guess you do.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Why not?
So here we are.
Thank you. Thank you to our director. Just please be allowed to read your biography,
In
Mike.
Italian, maybe?
Or in English,
No,
as
maybe
you
in
want.
Italian.
Yeah, I have it both languages. Okay. Here I am. Mike Joseph Winkelmann, Fond du Lac, USA, 1981. Conosciuto professionalmente, you trust that we are reading something.
Your bio.
Yeah, your bio. Conosciuto professionalmente come Beeple, è nato nel Missouri da madre direttrice di un centro anziani e da padre ingegnere. Studia computer science alla Purdue University. Artista digitale, grafico e animatore americano, è noto principalmente per la produzione di cortometraggi, Loop VJ Creative Commons, Everydays ed NFT. Nella sua arte utilizza varie tecnologie per creare opere satiriche e fantasmagoriche, generalmente figurative, che muovono critiche alla politica e società contemporanee, servendosi dei riferimenti della cultura pop, della cultura digitale e dei new media. I suoi video clips sono diventati onnipresenti nello spazio visivo dei concerti a livello mondiale e si ritrovano nel lavoro con Justin Bieber, Imagine Dragons, Eminem, Nicki Minaj, Katy Perry, One Direction, Zedd e molti altri artisti, compreso il lavoro artistico per il Super Bowl. L'opera di Beeple si trova anche nella Gigafactory Tesla di Austin, in Texas, su commissione di Elon Musk, e nelle principali collezioni private di arte digitale, quali quella di Ryan Zurer e Pablo Rodriguez Frail. Nell'aprile 2022 collabora con Madonna a una serie di opere di video performativi dal titolo Mothers of Creation. Il lavoro di Beeple è da sempre radicato nel desiderio di stare a cavallo tra fisico e digitale, spesso lavorando con oggetti fisici collegati ai suoi NFT. Human One, del 2021, ha fatto il suo debutto proprio qui, al Castello di Rivoli, nell'aprile 2022, in occasione della mostra Espressioni con frazioni, per essere poi successivamente esposto all'Emplus di Hong Kong. In Human One, l'artista sperimenta realizzando un'opera ibrida digitale e fisica, composta da un NFT e una scultura videocinetica dalla forma di una grande scatola girevole autoportante, il cui personaggio metamorfico post-gender, tra rider e astronauta, cammina senza sosta attraverso paesaggi virtuali in perpetua evoluzione. alludendo forse alla solitudine e alla vita nel metaverso che si preannuncia nel XXI secolo. FTX Board Meeting Day 5676-11-13-2022 è un'opera unica 1-1 dell'Everyday postato il 13 novembre 2022 e comprende una componente fisica, il dipinto, e una componente digitale, il token online. Nel 2017 Winkelmann si trasferisce a Charleston, South Carolina, con la moglie e i 2 figli, per vivere vicino al fratello Scott, ingegnere aeronautico alla Boeing. In seguito alla vendita di Everyday's The First 5,000 Days nel marzo 2021 per 69 milioni di dollari statunitensi, Scott lascia Boeing e inizia a lavorare con il fratello Mike. Scott. Nella primavera 2023 aprono Beeple Studios, un museo privato di arte digitale immersiva, un community center e un laboratorio per la sperimentazione del mondo nuovo, which I truly hope we are going to discuss today. So thank you, Mike, for being with us. I would just start with a very straightforward question. What is this all about? And focusing mostly on particulars and details, because those are very pivotal in your artworks generally and everydays.
Sure. So this is, first off, thank you guys so much for having me. This is such a massive honor to be here, and it is a massive honor to have this piece in the collection at Castillo here. This is the first piece that has ever been acquired by a museum of mine, and so this is just such a massive honor, and I appreciate so much Carolyn's sort of support of my work, and especially I appreciate her picking this piece in particular, which I do want to point out was her choice, not mine.
Okay.
I just want to throw her, there it is, yes.
We're going to ask her about this, so next.
So this piece was done last November as part of the Everyday series, again, where I do a picture every day. And it is dealing with Sam Bankman-Fried, who was the CEO of FTX. And for those unaware, this was a very, very large $14-15 billion crypto company that was kind of complete bullshit when you peel back the onion. And he tricked a lot of people, and within a couple days, it sort of unraveled, and people realized this was all bullshit. And it was a Bernie Madoff type scheme where he was lying about what was being invested in, and these investments were gone, and they'd already lost a massive amount of the money. And so this all came out. He is currently pending, he's not pending, the trial or whatever. They're waiting to go to trial with him. And during the sort of time where the details were coming out about what actually was going on with the money, and during that, it came out that him and his other goons that worked with him, his girlfriend and a bunch of other people, they were all kind of like getting together and having sex at the offices. And so that was another just like, what the fuck was going on with these idiots? And so that's where this sort of came in. And there's kind of little notes in the back about effective altruism and some of the other sort of, now we realize just total bullshit that he was spinning about how he was going to give all this money away and all this other shit. And so, yeah, that's kind of how we arrived at this piece.
Well, I mean, do you think that we should translate or no, not necessarily.
But I think there's a few things to define, like effective altruism.
Would you like to try to do this, Carolyn?
And answer the question?
And
why?
also about the criteria according to which you decided or determined the relevance of this piece for our collection.
Well, first of all, to pick up with what
Yes.
you said, the effective altruism I found very interesting in the background. because there is this young philosopher in England at the university called William McCaskill, who comes from logic theory, and he has written books about effective altruism, and he would be the philosopher most read by Elon Musk and all the digital communities of Silicon Valley, which is an interesting fact because, well, first, ironically, this guy, is this me? This guy was not exactly an altruist. And so you question whether what does it mean to try to have an impact, social impact in the world, and to help the disenfranchised of the world, and do that without delegating, but doing it directly? Because most of these people think that governments and government policies or the European Union or all that are corrupt. And so we need to privatize the society, but then the leaders of the society need to be able to be altruistic and compensate for what governments would normally be doing. So supporting the poor, vaccinating people, and so on. And when I read the books of McCaskill, it seemed a really mad logic, because why would you go to a universe of very, very rich, very, very poor, and then have the very, very rich be the ones deciding who gets help? And some of the logics, for example, we are a museum and we're getting budget cuts, constantly budget cuts. Museums all over the world are getting budget cuts. And the museum in Rio burnt, and the Patrimoine de l'Humanité burnt, because the director, my colleague, didn't have money to pay for the new wiring in the building with thousands of artifacts. But when you read William McCaskill, you understand that it is not effective to support museums because you reach less people. So it's all a calculation, like a mathematical calculation of how to reach more people. And so the logic behind effective altruism is a kind of a development out of certain pragmatic theories of British pragmatism of the 19th century. I really don't know what to do. This is like I'm going to hold it, this little bug. So that is why I also found interesting this contrast between Sam Bankman-Fried and the zeros, the numbers that we're talking about. I don't think I'm doing anything wrong.
Is this me?
But then there's going to be a feedback. White noise. Hello? Okay. Bene. No. So that was like one detail, because I didn't even know that Mike Winkelmann knew what effective altruism was. So this has something to do also with different knowledge bases and so on. But anyway, the main reason was that I'm interested in art that adopts and uses technologies as they emerge, technologies of communication, but that also critique those technologies in the way that Caravaggio did, or Masaccio did, or so many great artists of the past, including Marcel Duchamp and his relationship with consumer goods, the way that the ready-made was simply stopping the flow of the serially produced objects of the new industry, the new mass industry. So if the ready-made for me is not so important in terms of the fact of signing, making an artwork, like this is an artwork, I sign it. It's not that the only thing. The main point for me is withdrawing objects of serial productions in early modernity at the same time as Ford and all these people are starting to make factories, and pull it out of that and stop it in a kind of metaphysical suspension. So I look at how Andy Warhol did that with consumer culture and celebrating it and critiquing it. And I look at it in the way that you celebrate and critique, sometimes being criticized within your own community. So I'm less interested in digital artists that are making fantastic, beautiful, abstract images, and more interested in the scratchiness, in the contradictions that appear in this work. And then I'm particularly interested in censorship in the social media realm, but that might be a question for later.
I would like to make this question to both of you.
Yes. So did I answer the question?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, as
Did
far
I
as
answer
I'm
the question
concerned,
of why?
it is quite wide, yeah.
No, there's one more reason. Is that what I find really interesting in Mike is that he looks like a teenager. You know, he looks like he's 12, but he was born, when was he born?
81.
81, for God's sake.
I'm 42.
Yeah, you're almost an old man. And yet you look like a teenager. So I'm very, very interested in the adolescent nature of this sort of derangement of the digitalized world. I mean, these kids, you know, that were like inventing the internet in those garages, and all the myths around these kids in the Silicon Valley, these kids, you know, fooling
he's
around.
very young too.
I mean, 31.
Sam Bankman-Fried is very young too, and
Like
he was
31.
very much looked at as this like whiz kid. Oh my God, he's come
Yeah.
up with all these algorithms.
But the
that
whole
save the world.
generation, the whole tech generation is like an adolescent generation to me. It's like, that doesn't, not gone through, for example, what Zoran Muzic went through, that we just saw together, you know, in Dachau.
On the third
So
floor,
for
yeah.
me, it's like an adolescent, utopian, narcissistic, full of disorders that have to do with a mirror stage. You know, one of the first things I think we talked about was Lacan and the mirror stage, and I sent you that essay. And so this to me is a portrait of a subjectivity that has not gotten out of the mirror stage, for better or for worse, you know, that thinks that the milk will come no matter what, that there's no, that the breast of the mother is just attached all for like 85 years or something. So that is very interesting to me, because it means we're going into a very particular generation of artists, but of humanity, a very immature sort of humanity. What do you think?
What's your take on that?
I think the overall maturity level of the internet is very low, and I think it's more about sort of getting people, and I think I look at sort of the things that like Trump does and says, and like how people really love him just like saying dumb shit and owning the libs. And it's kind of like, guys, what are we talking about? Like, are we actually trying to solve fucking problems here? And it's sort of, I think it's one of these things where they're just, I don't know what it is. I think what is causing this, I think it's possibly our sort of, relationship with technology, where we're so used to things just being immediate and just sort of like it's made us more immature, maybe. I don't know. But I think that's something that I'm very much trying to capture with a lot of my work. And I think people look at it as, oh, this is immature. And it's sort of like, it is purposely immature as a reflection of the times that I believe we live in.
Yeah. I mean, we are willingly jumping into the question of censorship, particularly speaking in terms of social networks and who is using social media. I was wondering, what are your thoughts about like social medias or social media companies, as we experienced, attempting to moderate or moderating artistic content?
Maybe we need to tell people what we experienced.
Yeah, I mean, we had a very bad accident, let's say, when we were trying to create the link for this YouTube live streaming, where all the online people are watching us now. We attempted to upload a part of this image, and we got immediately, not censored yet, but immediately we got an advice similar to this of yours. Can you move with the presentation, please? So, yeah, this is your post being removed. We received a similar kind of message saying that that picture that we uploaded was against the community guidelines of YouTube, and we were warmly suggested to take it off and not attempting a second time. This led to the fact that with the director, we decided to, kind of producing an auto-censored image of your work. So we acted, preventing a second backlash in a sense. So I was wondering, and we were discussing together how to navigate this. So my question was concerning your concerns about social media platforms that are moderating or are expecting to moderate artistic content. How do you navigate this? Especially because everydays are basically made on, distributed on platforms such as Twitter or Instagram. So
yeah, it's definitely tough because they all have their own sort of rules. Although Twitter, it seems like you can post almost anything right now and get away with it.
Instagram, let's speak about this later. So
yeah, Instagram is definitely, you can't sort of like post almost anything. And like, if I were to post this image completely uncensored, I mean, it immediately would get flagged, and it would also ding my account and like just show way less people my stuff moving forward. And so here was another one where this one had absolutely no nudity in it. But it said it goes against the thing. It was a picture of Tucker Carlson having sex with a green M&M. There was, I don't know, for people who know, there was this whole big thing where they were trying to act like the green M&Ms were like, they had like desexualized them or something, that apparently the green M&Ms were like this woman, and then they tried to, I don't know, it was a whole big right-wing sort of like talking point. And so it's very tough, and I think it's frustrating for me as an artist, and I think it will probably honestly get worse, because your thing being immediately flagged like that is because it was just a machine using AI that looked at the image, determined there was nudity, and immediately flagged it. Mm-hmm. Almost definitely nobody looked at that image.
Sure.
And so I think more and more we will be dealing with machines that are censoring things, again, at the behest of humans who have set certain guidelines. But I think it's very tough, because we were talking about this before. I don't necessarily think these websites, which are private companies, should have to show anything. So I think in some sense they are, it is within their rights of, having a company and trying to make money, that it's probably very hard to sell ads. Nobody wants their ads next to this image, which is fair. I get that. But at the same time, all of our speech is now in the hands of these private companies, which, for better or worse, I don't know. That's just how it is. And so, again, these people wield a massive, massive amounts of power over our speech, what can be said, how it can be said. And I don't think we've quite recognized that yet. I don't think we've quite recognized the insane amount of power. I look at, and I think we'll look back at the moment that Jack Dorsey kicked Trump off of Twitter as a massive sort of turning point. You had a person who is a private individual, and he had the ability unilaterally to immediately sort of silence the President of the United States. And he didn't have to lobby Congress. He didn't have to go to the UN and say, oh, I think this person should not be heard anymore. He just did it. He just woke up one morning and said, you know what? Fuck you, dude. I'm done. And so that is an insane amount of power for one person to just unilaterally have. And so I think this is going to be a recurring theme sort of moving forward, across the board with these social media companies.
Would you like to add something, Carolyn, on that?
Well, yes. It's interesting because as you said, most people here, anywhere, don't understand that constitutions that were written at the basis of modern democracies all have freedom of speech or freedom of expression in them, and these constitutions, they don't have any validity in what is the public space of today. So the public space has been totally privatized and abides by other laws and other rules. But the real problem, the catch here, is that in this regime, communicative regime, if the Western democracies were to put in place certain protection for freedom of speech, probably it would be the demise of America and the West and Europe, because that's not happening in China, and it isn't going to happen in India, and it's not going to happen in Dubai, and it's not happening in Russia. So there's a kind of technological arms race within this control of the communication with AI. And so the question in front of the Western and Northern global North is either you lose, I mean, I wouldn't want to be in the constitutional place where they write I wouldn't like to have this problem.
You mean the policymakers at these companies?
Yeah. No, I wouldn't like to have the problem of how to protect. I'd rather be in art than having the problem of how to write the laws for the future that protect individual freedom, whatever that is, at a time when you're in an arms race about artificial intelligence. And so it's like a problem. That's a good reason to retire, by the way. So that said, so I wanted to just add that it's a really major problem of the future, how we want our societies to be organized in the future. But we're talking about the world. This is something interesting, that we're in an art museum, and we're talking, and by the way, your work also makes fun of Biden a lot, and it made fun of Obama, so it seems to make fun of politicians across the board. It's not just about Trump. It seems to be everybody, left, right, and maybe not so much center, but anyway. The fact is that what I mean to say is that it means something that we're sitting here talking about the outside world while we're in this art museum, and nobody has spoken about art on this stage yet tonight at all, zero. So that is an interesting point. So what does it mean that talking to people is talking about a window onto the world? It's like the everydays are going onto the social media every day. They're posted to the world, has billions of followers. So it's a constant portal. And what does that mean? That an artist is making sculpture, social sculpture, out of this portal.
I mean, taking this invite, yeah, why not? Why don't you try?
Why don't you answer a question?
I mean, I'm here to moderate. So my role here
She's
is
really
making
putting you on
questions.
blast. Yeah, what the fuck?
I mean, if you want, I can answer, but I don't think that this is my spot to do that. Indeed,
I'm not 100% sure I did get what the question was there. When you say we're not talking about art, we are talking about this piece. What are you saying we're not talking about art?
That's interesting. That's kind of a Joseph Beuys answer.
Okay.
I mean, okay, let's put it this way. Talking about art, I would like to know more. Art in general, and this in particular, I would like to understand the tools, because you define them tools. And I refer to softwares such as Cinema 4Ds, or another one that it's Octane Render,
Sure.
Which is quite curious, the fact that it's defined as an unbiased rendering. I mean, I know that unbiased doesn't mean that.
No.
It's more like a technical,
Sure,
issue.
sure.
But what I would like to ask you, so I go straight to the point, is what is your relationship with the so-called tools that you are using? Do you consider them as co-creators or more like operational assistant? So what kind of attention do you have when working with this kind of also deep learning models? Because during your previous conversations, you spoke a lot in terms of DALL-E, but also stable diffusion. Maybe you can introduce also to the public. Yeah, exactly. So I would leave you the floor to broaden it up.
Sure. So the tools that I use are sort of, Cinema 4D is the main tool that I use, and it is a 3D modeling tool where basically you bring in 3D sort of like objects and you can place them wherever. So if you look at the, sort of like image, maybe we can bring up the like image again, or like this image.
Okay,
let's say this
stick
image.
to this. Yeah.
So this image was from a couple days ago. It was a thing about this hot dog eating contest that we have in America on Independence Day. It's a stupid thing. And so I basically made a 3D model of this guy, and from there I can kind of pose it however I want. So from there I can kind of, it has sort of like a bone structure, and I can kind of, like a sort of a doll, pose it in any way. And so I could open his mouth and sort of move his hands like this, and I had to take each one of his sort of like bones and move it and sort of like make it look like he was gripping these hot dogs. This is all in Cinema 4D. And so then I also had models that I already had that I've got like a library of all different models. I had a model of Trump's head and I have a model of Biden's head. And so I sort of put those on these
Models
kind of
that
like
you made.
models that somebody else made.
Like
What's up?
stock models.
Yeah, so they're like, it's sort of like stock photography, but instead of just being a flat 2D picture, it's a 3D model that you can kind of do sort of a lot more things with. So from there, I kind of placed these heads on this thing and sort of like changed his shirt and put in the thing there. And then from there, I kind of render it and take it into Photoshop, and then I sort of draw details on. So I kind of blended their heads into there, drew some sort of like drool on him, kind of changed his hair a little bit, changed the background, put this flag on his shirt. And so to me, the process, I find it very, there's a lot of different sort of like aspects of it. In the beginning of the process, it's very much like sculpture, because I'm taking these sort of 3D models and I'm placing them and sort of building up a sort of 3D object. Then from there, I have to light it. And so for this one, I sort of chose a daylight, but I could choose any sort of lighting. And then I have a virtual camera where I then shoot the 3D objects to make a still sort of like picture from. And so from there, it becomes very much like photography. And then I take it into Photoshop, and then I paint on details and sort of composite the image together. And so from there, it resembles painting a lot. And so it really has a bunch of different sort of like aspects to it that I find, there's a lot of different possibilities from this. So now, this is the process that I've sort of like gone through for the last, I would say probably 6-7 years. Before, I used to model everything, and it was much more abstract, and I wouldn't use other models that other people did. Now, there's all these AI image generators. And
deep learning, yeah.
They can generate an image in literally 2 seconds from just a prompt, and they're getting better and better. And so before these came out, it felt like I was using the absolute fastest, most advanced tools to create images. And now it honestly doesn't feel like that. I almost feel like a painter in a way, that I'm doing the slower way of making these images when I could just type a few words in and ba-ba-doo. Joey Chestnut eating 2 hot dogs with Trump's heads on.
But you tried that. I remember when DALL-E had just come out, you started doing tests.
I did do tests. Right now, if I were to type in this, the AI is still not quite good enough, where I've got a pretty specific picture in my head of what I want, that it can't quite get it yet, because the images are too kind of weird and abstract to be able to do exactly what I want. But they're getting better. And there is ways that I can sort of use them in the process a little bit to feed in images instead of prompts, in which they will take this image and return something very similar to it, just a little bit better. But it's something where these tools are, again, it has changed the way I look at my own process because they are so insanely powerful. So I think it's something that is progressing very rapidly, and I think will be something that all of us will use in the future. And I don't think it's something that we'll all consider ourselves artists. I look at photography, we all take pictures, but we don't all consider ourselves photographers. And so I think these AI tools will be very similar. Everybody will use these AI tools to generate images, and you won't be like, I'm a digital artist now.
Like I can go on holiday with somebody I want.
I think you will use
movie.
them for many different things.
But there is something that I would like to highlight in what you just said, which is I've always worked in a sculptural way, which is interesting because with Human One, we are talking about, I don't know, phygital. We use this, but
Phygital, yeah.
Yeah,
Why
but
did
it's
you want
something
to
that
go
we
into
don't
the
like
real
it that
space?
much. But the point is like that you have merged the so-called two realms, which is something that even this, we don't like to call this binary dimension digital. But this happens the same. It happens the same in this occasion with this work, because like we just installed on the first floor of Castello a painting. So would you like to further explain that? And then
What it means to have a physical component and a digital.
yeah, it's not
And
a
are you
turn- it's
becoming
not-
like a traditional artist now?
I don't look at it like that. I think having a physical component, which the piece that I did here has the NFT, and it also has a oil painting that went with it. And I did not make the oil painting.
Yeah.
I made the original sort of JPEG, and that was used to make an oil painting from it. And to me, it's really about the ideas that you are trying to put forward in the image, and not so much the medium in which they are sort of being viewed. I think with the oil painting, to me, when you take an image and commit it to a physical object, I think as humans, we look at it a bit closer, and it doesn't seem as ephemeral as something that's just on a screen that you know the screen could change, and I think there's a tendency to not view it in the same way. And so for me, I think it's interesting sort of jumping back between these two worlds, because
writing the hyphen, basically.
What's up?
Writing the hyphen between.
Yeah. I think it's something where our worlds are going to continue to get more blurry. I think, as smartphones become more ubiquitous, and, we're, some number of years from headsets where we're wearing them around and sort of seeing AR and things like that. So I think the physical and digital worlds will become just one, and I don't think there will be so much like, either you're in this one or that one. To me, that seems like a mindset that is going to be very temporary.
Yeah, I still do recall, Carolyn, when in one of your conversations, which is on Digital Cosmos, if someone wants to watch it, that you were discussing about having walking paintings, or paintings that they were like hanging, but with moving images in a sense. Do you remember this, Carol? No.
I don't remember it, but I think it's a great idea, walking paintings. Paintings that walk, that would be fantastic.
No, paintings with individuals walking within. So yeah.
You mean like a video screen?
Yeah.
But made with paint.
Yeah.
Can you do that?
I do remember.
Can you do that? Can you
I
make the paint
cannot.
move?
I cannot make the paint move.
well,
there
we'll
you
get
go.
there. We'll
Speaking
get there,
in terms
though.
of art, because this is what you were very interested in doing tonight, you mentioned Andy Warhol, but also in different and several conversations, also Opalka. Would you like to expand more on that, and why you mention him when speaking in terms of endurance process of creation with Beeple?
I think in one of the first conversations we had,
the first.
shortly after the sale, I did mention Roman Opalka, that is a conceptual artist I loved very much. He was a friend, he died, he counted. He counted time, he counted his life. Every day he would take a picture of his face at the end of the day, And then he painted from 1 to infinity, writing number. He counted from 1 to infinity with a paintbrush, white on black, and added at every painting 1% more white paint in the black. So it slowly became white on gray, and I became an expert. And I could say, oh, that's an opalka of the 1980s, that's an opalka of the 1990s, that's late 60s, because the gray, it became paler and paler. And once he told me, I would like to arrive at counting on white before I die, so that you can't see but that didn't happen. He died before he could get there. But so the most recent ones are this kind of Gordon Pym white universe, but on a slight gray. So it's a very moving work. He was not that famous. I mean, he's famous within the art world, but it had to do with time and the time of one's life and marking time. So at the beginning, when I read about your everydays, I thought, well, that's nothing new. Everybody's been doing counting pieces and marking time, like Roman Opalka or on Cavara, the date paintings and so on. So why is this so new? It's just the Christie's digital curators who don't know about conceptual artworks that are based on counting time. But then I understood after a while that it's not the same. I mean, this has not so much to do with time, in my view. It has to do with time, but it doesn't really have to do with marking time. I think it has to do with giving order to what would be a chaotic existence otherwise, because the digital world is totally chaotic. It's a world of distraction, of total distraction. And, you want to answer somebody, you pick it up, you find somebody else's message, you forget who you wanted to answer, and you answer the person who just wrote you. And it's like a mental disorder. So it's not about marking time, it's about having order, so that every day, I think you can say, has to find the 2 hours within which he's alone, focuses, does these things. So it's more like a yoga of existence than marking time, I think, but in this chaos of the digital. And in that sense, it's quite original, I think.
Yeah, I think it's not so much about just
Focus.
putting just like another slash on the thing and sort of like trying to count like that. It started out as just a practice to get better at making images. And in the beginning, the actual output of what I made each day was just like, it didn't even matter to me. It was just, this was about really just sitting down and trying to get better at art. And then over a while, it became about actually trying to sort of say something with the art. And the images that you see now that are very sort of like political and very sort of like topical and current to, many times what happened that day, that's actually very recent, and only the everydays in the last, say, 4 years or so. And I've been doing it for 16 years. And so sort of the purpose and the ideas behind what the everydays are has changed quite a lot in that time. And something occurred to me just sort of like recently about this, again, related to the sort of like AI pieces, is that when I started out doing the everydays, doing one piece every day seemed like a lot. That was like, wow, you're doing a piece every day. You're going to put out
Such a
365 different pieces per year. That's quite a lot. And now with AI, I believe by the end of the everydays, that will seem like very little. Like, wow, you're only putting out one picture a day. You could be putting out 50 pictures a day, because again, the tools have made it so fast and so easy to put out content that I actually think that level of output will seem somewhat restrained in the future.
Yeah, that's another thing that is similar to the parallel with pop art in general, and in particular Warhol, because when he said everyone will be famous for 15 minutes, he meant everybody will be famous, for a really short amount of time, but everybody will. God, if I have to be famous for 15 minutes, it's so hard. You know, it's so long. I just want a few seconds, that's all. A few
span of
seconds is
attention.
plenty, you know, for the attention, because otherwise somebody's going to write a message and say that, you know, that we shouldn't be hanging the Catalan horse or something. So it's very dangerous to be focused on for more than a few seconds. So in that sense, you're saying something similar in a way, it would seem. A different conception of time and of the production within a certain amount of time. Nobody's asked, should we?
Open up.
Well, I think nobody has asked the sort of elephant in the room question, which is about the NFTs and the money, you know?
My next question was like, would you like to share with us the experience that you had yesterday of minting?
Oh my God.
Or is it too private? Is it like?
It was a nightmare.
Yeah.
Well, I think
You should start, Mike. No, maybe you
Sure.
should.
I
don't know.
think we were setting up a ledger and putting the NFT on it, and
Castello,
for the
first
Castello.
ledger.
And I think it's something where I think these processes need to be simplified quite a lot before this is ready for mainstream adoption. And I think there's a lot of people in the crypto world who unfortunately have become so sort of locked in this echo chamber of crypto that they don't quite see how complicated it is to the outside person. And so I think for it to truly reach its potential, we really need to focus on making this simpler and what are the ways in which we can very tangibly make this better than the existing systems that we have. And in some ways it is, but in some ways it definitely, there is a lot of room for improvement.
So, Carolyn, like what kind of steps did you take just to make our...
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, no, it was very interesting yesterday in the office of the administrator, because it's the first time that the registrar is in the office of the financial administration of the Castello. And there was no transaction of money because it's a donation, it's a gift. But it's interesting that we had to bring the registrar there. And it was one thing that we learned along the way is that we should not have one wallet for all digital NFTs in the collection.
Would you like to explain more? What is a wallet? Everybody knows what is a wallet?
Well, a wallet is an account. It's an online account within which you can put a token, which is points to an image or a video or a sound or anything, which is accessible worldwide. But it's determined by a code, which is the smart contract. And in this case, the smart contract can generate many tokens. It is the smart contract by which he mints, meaning creates, the NFTs from the everydays. Because the everydays, sometimes he makes editions of like 100, and they're worth less money. And they are dropped. Dropped means like published in a way, put out on the market.
Airdropped.
And airdropped. So, and sometimes, very rarely, out of these 5,600, there are like 50 or 60 unique everydays. That's what the one-on-one is, edition of one.
Yes, sure.
And that is all descending from this one smart contract. So when you're gifted this or you acquire it, you have to get it put into your wallet, which is your account. So you have to make this account. So you can make the account in a very vulnerable way, just on the internet, or you can make it through like a USB stick, which is what we were doing. If it's not a USB stick, it's called a ledger.
Okay.
And
Hardware wallet.
it's a hardware wallet, so it's like having Arteria or Artindep. It's like a storage place.
Okay.
So one thing we realized with the registrar is that if it were to be somehow hacked or broken into, then we would lose all the works easily. So we will make one wallet for every work. That's a procedure. It's a protocol. I mean, I'm getting boring now, but for people who are interested in museology, I think we're the first museum in the world that has posed this question and then solved it. So the solution is to have one ledger for one wallet for each NFT. And so we separated the passwords, not the passwords, the PIN, and I mean, there's a certain number and the so-called seed phrase, which is interesting, which is a recovery phrase. We separated these elements physically. So the registrar took into the storage of our museum the little hardware piece, which by itself means nothing. So she cannot look at the work. And the administration kept the PIN, so they cannot access it either because they don't have the hardware. So I split up the different things in the museum and sent it to the board. So the board of trustees knows how to do this, but nobody in the museum, and not even myself anymore, knows how to do it because I don't remember the seed phrase. I would have to
Here we go.
I would have to get these three elements.
And you've been hacked.
No, I've not been hacked. So it's secure. But then came the Notary Act. The Notary Act was done today. And what was very interesting in the Notary Act is that, which was written between the notary and some of his consultants. And the Notary Act specifically refers to the fact that the artwork is the combination between the two parts, the physical and the digital. So that is the only place that art historically, an art historian would locate this declaration because it's not declared by him anywhere.
I see.
So there is an act that sanctifies this dual nature. And secondly, the act says that we cannot ever sell it or
Inalienabile.
it's unalienable.
Okay.
And that is very interesting because there is a vulnerability to this kind of asset that it could not fall under the normal protocols that we have in place for our collection. I mean, it looks like a conto in banca, a bank account. So our normal protocols that don't allow us to sell works might not apply to something like this. So it was written explicitly in that. And in that, it goes against the basic nature of the digital world, which is a flow of, I think it's in the flow of the possession and the property of digital things that there's a value. I mean, the more things go around, the more they're kind of known by people.
But again,
so we're kind of hiding it.
No, you're not really hiding it because again, everybody can see the NFT right now. Everybody can go online and see the artwork immediately and see it exactly as I made it. The thing they can't see, obviously, is the physical painting that's here. And so to me, it's sort of the best of both worlds. You guys have a physical painting. If you go to the museum, you can see the physical painting that was made to accompany it. But everybody in the world can see the NFT.
Yes, but this is the first time in your life, I think, that you've made a traditional notarized declaration.
Yes.
And I think these are discussions we should have in a seminar, actually, in another moment.
It's a case study, in a sense.
But it's the first time in your life that you've actually legally bound a physical object to a digital object because you don't have that in your other NFTs that are sent with the underpants, the mutande he sends with the
Well, we did have some
box.
legal documents that were sent when you bought those things, which I'm sure that
But they
I don't
don't
even
say
know.
that you have to transfer the box together with the NFT. If you they don't say.
No.
So this is the first time that legally it's declared somehow that the artwork, so it's very avant-garde. I'm very interested in this procedure. I'm interested in, but I think it will be figured out better later.
Yeah,
But I would like to also say one thing that I always say, and I've said it 100 times to you, but just to say it to our public. I think that we are talking about money in a way because these NFTs go back and forth and are sold generally. And they've also collapsed in value, most NFTs, because and I asked you the question, what happens if they go below zero? That's interesting. Then you can have like those funny actions, those funny stocks that are like, those stocks that are, what are they called? The stocks that are like negative, like playing against something. Anyway, the kind of minus stocks. But anyway, like something that's worth less than zero.
Less than zero? I'm not sure how something could be worth less.
Well, that's interesting, in fact, the question. So that's my question. But now that, but what I mean by all this is that I think that the numbers, that talking about the numbers and the dollars and so on is not just to say that there is a market for this and that it's a very different market than the traditional art market, because that is a market associated with the bourgeoisie that rose in the 1700s and supplanted the aristocracy. So the aristocracy at a certain point didn't have any money, and the noble people had to lend money to the King of France. He was super in debt. The bourgeoisie had the money, and the aristocrats no longer, they had land. So if you have land, you can make wine, but it wasn't like wine today. So suddenly you have this emerging new class that has way much more money than the old aristocracy. And now we're in a moment where there's this digital wealth that is like a new wealth, and it has different zeros attached to it. And there's this kind of confrontation between old money and new money. But the new money is extremely volatile. It goes up, it goes down. It's a very strange class if one were to study it from a Marxist perspective, in terms of the rise of a social class, a new social class, and who holds the means of production and so forth. So it's a very complex issue this now, because this particular new social class goes up and down with these numbers a lot more than the older social class, where, the 1929 crash was like a big deal. So I'm thinking, my theory is that the material of the artwork is also numbers, and that the material of the artwork is numbers, is connected with the money, but it's not really connected with the money. What it's really connected with is the symbolic value of counting, because everything that's digital is counted in binary code. If I scan this, it's numbers. If you have a model of Trump, it's numbers. So we live in this world where everything is translatable into numbers, except maybe love or a few things that are in the amygdala, that come from like my dog.
No, it's sort of tokenization.
It's not about tokenization, it's about codification.
Okay,
that
codification.
With the rise of the digital, everything can be scanned and printed and so on. So you're translating it into numbers and then you're reprinting it. So it's a numerological world, and therefore it's normal that the artists would be using numbers also as part of their material. The numbers are the dollars or the crypto, bitcoins or the peat things or the frogs or whatever they are. And they're also the social media friends, the followers. And it's all numbers that are being, they are part of your artwork in a Boycean social sculpture way, your followers and things. What happens with these numbers? And it's like a very mysterious kind of Illuminati thing.
Speaking in terms of numbers and time, we need to wrap it up. So I leave you.
Answer that. What was the question there? You just monologue for like 25 minutes. I have no idea what the question was.
Do you think that numbers are part of your material as an artist?
Do I think that numbers are part of the material? Yes, I do think that somewhat of the material of sort of this work is about numbers and is about I think it is influenced by, you know, sort of how many people see it and sort of different things like that, and how many people, maybe not so much buy it. But I think, it is and it isn't. I think at the end of the day, I personally view the work that I'm doing as being very similar to just any other artist or painter, where I get up each day and it's like, what am I gonna say? And numbers do play into that sometimes, as what I'm going to say is affected by the stock market going up or the stock market going down or Pepe going up or blah, 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 or some other bullshit happening with the NFT world. So numbers do influence what I'm going to say. But at the end of the day, I'm just using this new tool to try and say something about human life, human existence, much like any other artist has done since the beginning of time.
I think that, yeah, let's say so. I would call it a day. And if there are some, se ci sono domande dall'alumno.
Thank you very much. We've gone over the time. Nel bookshop ci sono, credo, 35 libri rimasti che lui è disponibile per firmare, se volete un original Beeple, non digitale, e poi l'opera, metà dell'opera, è nella sala 14, che è la sala dove conoscete il cavallo di Maurizio Cattelan, e voilà, e poi c'è un drink di là nella caffetteria.
Grazie,
ciao, ciao.
Thank you. Grazie.
This one.